Cyberpunk is a cesspool of neon lights and debauchery, and in between are shreds of humanity. The settings are often depicted as run-down, high-tech places dominated by industry. Higher-ups wear suits, and the lower classes reside in slums with DIY augmentations and distorted personalities. Over the years, games, books, and movies often come with a message behind the visage of the cyberpunk landscape, and for some, it's just flair. But they all have one thing in common: control. And that is what Ruiner is all about. Control. Ruiner is a cyberpunk shoot-'em-up developed by Raycon Games and published by Devolver Digital, a prominent label known for helping publish some of the greatest indie games ever, including my personal favorite, Hotline Miami. Raycon have been around for a few years, but Ruiner is the only game in their belt currently, and a damn fine one at that, and I'll be explaining why I think this game is worth your time. Ruiner from the very get-go establishes its oppressive and ugly nature. Larger-than-life infrastructure, a corporation ruling the unforgiving metropolis Rencock, where life is cheap and thrills are a dime a dozen in the year 2091. But the desire for control is the one thing the forces at hand strive for, and it is the key element that drives the story forward, as well as your character, literally. You play as a character called Puppy, who doesn't speak and can't show his face. Every other action he commits to is a result of being manipulated by the other characters in the story. This setting stands out for me among many other cyberpunk titles, because it is able to tell the story in three different ways: through your violent, senseless actions that you commit without knowing why, the red and black tone of Rencock's ugly but well-crafted visuals, and the agendas of every inhabitant you encounter. Each character's story is told by their appearance and what they say exactly. The setting of Rencock has conditioned the population to obey and survive, and you're one of its victims, albeit for different reasons. There isn't a great deal of voice acting here, mostly snippets, but it works fine, and the writing is decent. I liked many of the characters' designs personally. Raycon had a very well thought out idea for putting their own spin on the cyberpunk genre, and is consistent from beginning to end. In the beginning, you are taken over by an unknown figure, telling you to kill boss. Without question, you make your way to do that. Later on though, you end up meeting another character called Her, who basically does the same thing to you, but this time with a different objective in mind: to find your brother. You are taken to different sections of the city, all providing their own functions, from abandoned complexes taken over by street hoods, to burning red industrial factories, and underground labyrinths harboring digital slavery. Each area is quite unique in its own way, and it leaves an impression on me each time I get to see more of Ruiner. Now onto the gameplay. Ruiner commits to an isometric view, combining it with frantic gameplay. You have your gun and melee weapon in hand. You start with a basic pistol with the same namesake as the game, and a pipe you bust heads with. But you'll be able to switch weapons on the fly during combat, and from weapon lockers and dead bodies. Their durability can sometimes be problematic, especially on hard mode, but it can also be upgraded to make them last longer. Speaking of which, your character has an upgrade tree. The experience you earn, called Karma, can eventually level your character up, which gives you points to allocate towards new abilities, which are quite extensive and can help immensely during combat. You also have a health and energy system, which can also be upgraded too through leveling and ability allocation. The enemies are quite varied, and require different maneuvers and strategies to take them down. Each main level introduces you to different enemy groups, but nevertheless they follow the same pattern. Occasionally you come across headhunts, which function as mini-bosses, though again, same rules apply even for them. Dying will happen, frequently, especially on hard, but the good thing is that you can get into the action immediately after you die. No loading or any of that bullshit. After each fight, you are given a score based on your performance. Your combos, karma, and time are taken into account. Same goes for when you finish the main levels. The controls are relatively simple and easy to access and change. The abilities you select do modify said controls though, but that can also be edited to fit the player's personal preference. The game gives you 3 big baddies, including the boss himself, the man in charge of the ruling corporation, Heaven, and your goal is to get to them. Well, the goal you're given anyway. Each main boss has a certain gimmick to them, and is related to their personality and design. They weren't really that difficult for me personally, even on hard, but certain bosses were really annoying and frustrating, so it does vary from personal experience and playstyle. In between levels, you get to explore Rancok South, which is a slice of the metropolis you get to see. It's sort of like a social hub where you can visit other NPCs, and you get to learn a little bit about them. But Ruiner isn't like Cyberpunk 2077. You won't be getting hours upon hours worth of storytelling here. It's more or less a distraction, and has no consequence in the story's development whatsoever. The graphics in Ruiner are really quite nice for an indie game, especially since it's also powered by the Unreal 4 engine, and Raycon utilize it pretty well here. The lighting and shadows give off a nice contrast to the world design and characters. It's mostly red and black, but with some other colors in between. Animations are also incredibly satisfying during combat, especially when you dash and run, you're pulling off executions during combos. You know, it's all a joy to see. Cutscenes are simple to the point. You also have slideshow interactions with several characters, showing a comic-like art style to them. It's quite nice. I've always preferred realistic graphics in general. Games with cartoonish or abstract art styles are very hit and miss with me, but Ruiner strikes a great balance between realistic and artistic graphics. The soundtrack is incredible. Before I started playing Ruiner, I somewhat expected a mishmash of synthwave music or something along the lines of Deus Ex, but what I got instead was something else entirely. It's electronic alright, but the music itself is a number of things. Dark, frantic, heavy on the bass, and just gnarly. It's a soundtrack comprised of several electronic artists. Just to name a few, there's Zemilska, Sidewalks and Skeletons, Antigone and Francois X, and more. The soundtrack presents itself at the right moments, enhancing the story beats and the addictive gameplay loop. It's one of my favorite soundtracks in any game, and one of the more unique ones in the cyberpunk genre as a whole. In conclusion, there aren't too many negatives I can identify with Ruiner. It's an all-around fantastic cyberpunk game that I hold in high regard. It is a short experience. The ending left a lot of questions unanswered, the arena mode is frustrating, and the characters aren't fleshed out enough, as well as the story itself. But other than that though, everything else is on the positive end. Ruiner is definitely worth playing. It delivers a great art style and setting, gameplay that I can't get enough of, and a soundtrack that is just awesome. All delivered in a short but sweet package. Raycon have another project that is ongoing to my knowledge, and I can't wait to see what that will be. Thank you for watching.